past few lectures or classes, we had started actually the upfront planning part, and I hope you remember that the first thing that we covered was uh, how to develop the project management part. Actually, we started that this process starts off with two identification of two things. One is project development approach, and second one is development life cycle, right? So once we are done with these two parts, then we move on to planning of each of the knowledge areas or each of the aspects of project, right? And the first aspect that we started off was with this plan scope management, right? And this process, the scope management, planning of scope management, it gave us two plans. One was what? The scope management plan, and the second one was, no, paper would be very tough for you, I guess. Okay.
Requirement management plan.
Requirement management.
Requirement management plan,
Requirement.
right? Right. After that, we studied the collect requirement process, in which the main thing or main point was that from all the stakeholders that we identified during the initiating process group, we try to gather our requirements from them. And in this, we actually focused on a couple of things. Number one, it is the duty of project manager and his team or her team to gather the maximum requirements that they can right in the beginning, because if you'll not get the requirements in the beginning, or if you'll not get the correct requirements in the beginning, ultimately during the project later on, you may have to add on some new requirements, or you might be required to change the requirements. And changing the requirements or adding new requirements towards later stages of the project would cost you a lot. So it's always better to gather all the possible requirements right in the beginning. This was one point. Second thing that we focused on was, obviously people would try to add a number of requirements that may not even fall under the charter of this project, or they may not be directly related to the purpose for which the project was initiated, or they may not be even available in the scope statement. This last part was about replanning, right? And I explained this thing earlier in the last lecture. Then the third thing that we looked into during collect requirement was that uh, you know you cannot sometimes keep a track of all the requirements. So what do? We need to keep a track of the requirements. We prepare a requirement traceability matrix in which we actually cover the forward traceability, the reverse traceability, and the bidirectional traceability, right? And then there was one more part about the requirements. Yes, how to handle the competing requirements, because sometimes if you look towards the requirements regarding schedule, uh, let's say the requirement is to complete the project in 6 months, it might cost you more. So you have to keep a balance of that, and you know which objective is more important to you. This information would come. If you are a team member, you would go to the project manager. If you are a project manager and you are confused that which objective is more important, consult your charter, consult the business case. Even if still you are confused, just ask from your sponsor which thing is more important, right?
Stakeholders.
Stakeholder, obviously, but mainly I would ask from the sponsor, right? So because every stakeholder may ask you or give you a preference of his or her own choice, right? It is you as a project manager who have to set the preference or priority of each of the requirement. Okay, so once we have got all the requirements, we have prepared a requirement documentation and a requirement traceability matrix, then we actually move on to the next process, that is defining your scope, which would include the project scope as well as the product scope, right? This will give us a scope statement. I hope this is clear and
So
you
you
remember that.
define the product scope and the project scope both,
Both, yeah.
deliverables and expectations.
Exactly, exactly. So this scope statement would contain everything, including the, in scope and out scope, and the success criteria. Then we actually, once we have got the scope with us, we try to break it down using this WBS thing, right? And this would give us our scope baseline, which is, which has got three parts: the scope statement, the WBS, and the
Group
WBS
statement,
dictionary.
clear.
Right.
Yes.
Right here, CR asked me a question in the group. CR, did you get the answer? That if like the performance measurement baseline is a combination of three baselines, then why it is mentioned separately? CR, did
जी
you
सर
get the
हमने
answer?
रिजॉल्व कर लिया
Mm.
था।
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
okay, right. That was the case when we prepare our cost baseline using earned value management. I hope you remember that. In that
Yes,
case,
sir.
the
Yes,
cost
sir.
baseline would be called as the performance measurement baseline, right? So this is one thing. Second thing, like you may say, like this is just like it is a performance measurement baseline. This just imagine. Try to whenever you study something about project management or in general, try to visualize things, right? Look, what I'm saying, we just revised actually that the scope baseline contains a scope statement, it contains a WBS, it contains a WBS dictionary. What does it tell you? What is a baseline? It is the approved version of anything actually, right? If it is about scope, it is approved version of the scope. So this would be the thing that would contain all of the scope. And this scope would act as a reference for execution as well as for monitoring and controlling our performance. Is it clear? Similarly, we'll develop a schedule here that would give us a schedule baseline. And this baseline would act as a reference for everything that is related to schedule. Do you remember I told you the normal Gantt chart is a schedule baseline? I hope you remember that. I told you this thing in the last
Yes,
semester.
sir.
यस सर।
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So this
Yes,
would
sir.
tell
Yes,
you
sir.
oh this
इसमें कॉलम्स
information
होते हैं और आप
columns
प्रायोरिटाइज
होते हैं, right?
करके
Monthly or
अपने
now
जो
you
टाइम
must be
कर रहे
studying
होते
it
हैं
in your PMO as well, right? This is the thing that you will prepare a plan in the PMO as well. So this schedule baseline actually helps you in maintaining or in monitoring your schedule information only. Similarly, the cost baseline could be the monthly budgets, the quarterly budgets, and so on.
Sir,
That would
I'm
help.
sorry to interrupt you, sir. Schedule
Just
baseline is translated from a Gantt chart. A Gantt chart is translated from schedule
no, no, no,
baseline.
no. Gantt chart in itself, you may consider it as a baseline. Look, baseline is anything that you can use as a reference for your performance measurement, correct?
मतलब उसके Gantt
No, this Gantt chart is
chart
your,
schedule baseline बनाते हैं.
no, no, this is the baseline. This in itself is the baseline. Look, let me tell you, there could be many ways, there could be many diagrams, tools, methods, graphs that you can use as a baseline for your schedule. For example, what about network diagram? Have you ever used a network diagram? Or obviously you have prepared it, right? And after the mids, from lecture 10 onwards, obviously we'll study different variants of this network diagrams, right? Like you must have studied the network diagram only with the finish to start relationship. But what about start to start relationship? What about if there are some leads and lags in the network diagram? Then what? Right? So you must have studied something like that. But this diagram, this network diagram, doesn't talk about the schedule itself, isn't it? It does not tell you which activity is starting on which date. But if I somehow like the length of this activity tells you about the duration. Let's say this activity, which is slightly longer, is of 10 days, and this activity is of 8 days. Let's say this activities of 5 days or 5 weeks or whatever. And here I have, I just distribute this thing over time. So this is January, this is Feb. Now what is this? This is a time phased network diagram, isn't it?
जी सर।
Right? So even this can be used as a schedule baseline. But mostly what we use as a schedule baseline is like we have like is something like this time divisions here, right? First month, second month, third month, fourth month. And then we see which activities are planned during this. So there would be something like a bar. that would indicate an activity of this activity is like this activity is spanned over whole 1 month of, let's say, Feb, and then there might be an activity which may start maybe on, let's say, 16th of Feb, and it is ending on 20th of March, let's say, right? So this depiction of your intended or approved project schedule is called as the schedule baseline, right? However, there is another way of establishing the baseline, that is, we want to combine all three aspects into a single baseline. For that, earned value management, you know, is a method or a system that allows us to combine all these three baseline into a single baseline. And that single baseline is called as performance measurement baseline. Is it clear?
Sir, and it tells us whether
Yes,
we
sir.
are overcost, undercost, we are
Very
earlier,
right.
or we are
Behind the schedule or ahead of schedule, right?
behind the
So
And then
schedule.
so that's a measure, हमारी performance उससे measure होती है कि सारी चीजें जो है वो approved and that is according to the plan. तो हम अपनी performance
plan.
उससे देख के measure करते हैं कि जो हम
उससे देख के
plan किया था क्या it's
वेरी राइट
according to
सर,
that or not.
वेरी राइट सर, वेरी राइट। सो आज आप मूड में हैं एक नंबर लेने के, ठीक हो गया। कंटिन्यू, आपकी वो बात सुन के देन आई डिसाइड। अच्छा, so now if you if you remember, the last process that we covered was in the last lecture was creation of WBS or creation of a scope baseline, isn't it? I guess you remember that.
Yes.
Okay. Now, during this all process, like whatever we covered, our focus was mainly the predictive life cycle, or you may say that though whatever we covered was generic things, it does not, we didn't actually address a few points that are specific to adaptive, approaches, or what is the other name for adaptive approaches?
Agile.
Agile, sir?
Agile
Agile?
approaches or the change driven approaches, right?
Change driven.
Change driven, right?
It's change
so
driven
now
also.
so now let's have a quick look on few factors or few considerations that are specific to the adaptive approaches, right? Is it clear?
Sir, it's clear.
Okay, okay. So, I'll be focusing on three areas here. Number one, what is different there in the collect requirement or finalizing the requirement phase, when we are using an adaptive approach. Similarly, how scope is defined in an adaptive approach, right? And then how to break down the scope in case of adaptive approaches. Actually, there are, equivalent but different terminologies that we use in case of adaptive approaches. Is it clear?
Sir, it's clear.
It's
Yes,
clear,
sir.
right? So now let's start one by one. What about requirement gathering? This is our first point that we need to see. What is different there in requirement gathering phase, or what factors we must consider during the requirement gathering phase of adaptive approaches? Before I actually start this thing, I hope you remember in adaptive approaches, requirements are refined throughout the project, right? We keep getting the requirements. That's why they are called adaptive approaches, because requirements are not very much clear in the early stages of the project. So we actually plan things in small iterations, and we actually then keep refining our requirements. I hope you remember that, right?
Sir, it is basically
Yes, sir.
iterative automation.
Yes, sir.
I did right. So look, that is the first thing that you need to keep in mind, that in case of predictive life cycle, we try to gather all the possible requirements right in the beginning, right? But in
Already
case
predicted,
of
everything is planned.
planned, right? But in case of adaptive approaches, obviously requirements are refined during the course of the project. This is one thing. Second thing that you need to understand, it is written here. Look, in the beginning, of the project, during early stages of the project, let's say during first 3 4 iterations, things are very vague, right? Things are very vague. So let's say this is project manager and the team. They have prepared something from a very vague concept. They have, prepared during their first 10 days of, or during their first iteration, they have prepared something on paper, they have drawn some sketches, and now they have come to the stakeholders and uh, the team members. They want to know that, they want to show these things to the stakeholders that look, this is what we have understood from whatever interviews or whatever, observations we have conducted, or we, or whatever requirements that we had been given. Based on that, this is what we think that it is a product that you might be looking into at this stage. Since please, Hamay, mute रखिएगा. Since this part is very vague, so stakeholders, uh, they don't take much interest in this. This is very unfortunate, but you know, stakeholders are generally, they are tuned in towards getting a solid picture of their deliverables all the time. So till the time they don't get a solid picture, that means during early stages of, requirement refinement, at that time stakeholders, they just, don't take much interest. But look, this is the time when project manager and team members would be most interested in getting and refining the requirements, because they know it, that once they have finalized the requirements and they would start working on things, at that time, it would become difficult for them to change the design at later stages. Correct?
Sir,
But the dilemma here is that the, the stakeholders, they don't, generally they take very little interest once, in the beginning of the project, because they are often unimpressed by the apparent lack of progress or incompleteness of the solution. So they say, okay, this is, they don't consider it any, like, look, it's not going to work. This is in the back of mind, and it's useless to say anything. But that is the point, that is the time when, uh, the team members, they need to encourage the stakeholders and brief them that, look, sir, we understand that, since the ideas are very vague, and right now you may not see any apparent progress, but please give us your feedback, because we are working on it, and you would find, some tangible outcomes, or some outcomes or deliverables that you would actually appreciate at the later stages. But for that, we need to get your feedback, right, at as early as possible. So in this regard, now, I hope this is the same diagram that we have actually studied earlier, that this is the design phase, right? During the design phase, the cost of changes are very less, but you can influence those changes in the earlier stages, uh, much actually. But in the later stages, the opportunity for influence, it goes down, and the cost of changes, it increases. So this picture should be shown to, not like this exactly this diagram, but this scenario should be briefed to the stakeholders. Now, there's one more thing, and that is, in order to, uh, be successful, in order to have effective requirement gathering approach in adaptive life cycles, there are two things that are required: one from the team member, and other from the business or the other stakeholders of the organization. From team members point of view, this point is important. Team need to have courage to demonstrate incomplete solutions that may face criticism. Now, generally, team members, after their first or second meeting, they go reluctant, because they face a lot of criticism. Yaar, ye kya bana ke laye? What is this? We didn't want that. You haven't shown any progress yet. Oh, this is what you have brought after work of 10 days. We were expecting something different. So, they feel reluctant. They try to, immediately make something which would be appreciated by the stakeholders, and once they bring it by putting in extra effort, that item, that deliverable, you know doesn't meet the expected requirements of the customer. Look, there are two things I'm talking about. One, bringing a solution that is very vague. Here, team members would face a criticism that this is very incomplete. This is very incomplete. So, in the next session, if they try to bring something which is complete without knowing the exact requirements, so they have wasted this time actually. This is what we don't want. We want that from this incomplete picture, we get some feedback from the customer so that during the next cycle, whatever we prepare, that should actually be aligned with their requirements rather than with the fear of criticism, we prepare something or we spend effort and resources on something which is for sure going to be rejected later on. Is it clear?
Sir,
Right. So team needs to come out of this fear. In case of, from business point of view or from the stakeholders or functional managers or other users that are there in the in the organization, they need to trust and imagination into how the system may look in order to provide the feedback as soon as possible. Actually, they need to take it serious as well. Whatever, vague picture or vague deliverable the team has brought after the effort of 10 days, then stakeholders need to put in, they need to envision, okay, what he's trying to say or what she's trying to say about this, right? I'll cover actually uh, this context in more detail after a couple of slides when we will be talking about user stories, right? That will give you a fair idea that why stakeholders, they don't understand what is the requirement of team members or what team members want from you, what level of detailed feedback team members want from you, right? So they generally they can't apprehend uh, that how important it is. Is that clear?
sir, it's
Okay,
well said.
Yes, sir.
right, sir. Okay, now next thing is defining the scope. Now, you know, in case of predictive life cycle, we said that there's a term that we use, the scope statement, but there are some other. जी मैम.
सर आपने कहा इफेक्टिव रिक्वायरमेंट अप्रोच जो है वो एक तो टीम मेंबर उसमें इन्वॉल्व होते हैं और दूसरा ऑर्गेनाइजेशन होती है। ऑर्गेनाइजेशन किस तरह होती है?
Okay, look, uh, let's say, okay, now let me discuss this part, right, in detail first. Let's say Bahia University wants to get their all like admission, fee submission, and like educational requirements like teacher registration, the class registration, and exams and submission of assignment, everything automated, right? So they would require an automated system for that. Is it clear, ma'am? And everyone,
Yes, sir.
right? Okay. Now, this may have multiple, parts in it. Let's say we we start off with, or we divide this work into three major chunks. One is something called as learning management system or the campus management system. Let's say learning management system would be an appropriate term for that. In this, we would require teachers to log in as a teacher and mark, within that, there should be different sections that are assigned to this teacher, right? And within each section, there would be students who are enrolled in this section in each of the sections. Then teachers should be able to mark their attendance. Teachers should be able to upload the lectures. Teachers should be able to upload the assignment question and quizzes and papers and everything. Then as a student, you should be able to enroll. And then what do you need from that? you obviously you are not concerned about marking the attendance, but you should be having an access to the handouts, what teacher has shared. If teacher has made any announcement, you should be able to see that. You should be able to view
But
your,
this is incremental ना.
sorry,
This is incremental ना, that आप देते जा रहे हो उनको
yes, अब हाँ,
multiple
लेकिन
dimensions.
अभी तो मैं एक generic idea दे रहा हूँ, this is what we want to do from this project, right? Okay, then there would be some administration people, like who would assign different sections and courses to me. I just keep waiting, like maybe until last week of the start of the semester, before the start of the semester, and I wait that administration, the administrative staff, they would tell me that these are the three courses that you are going to teach, or these are the five sections that you are going to teach. So accordingly, similarly, students would be there, and they would be enrolled in different sections, and then those sections would be allotted to different teachers, right? So this power or these features should be available with the administrative staff. Obviously, if the administrative staff is HOD, he or she might want to see lot many other things. If it is the principal, then obviously the requirements or features that are required by a principal would be quite different from that of HODs, right? And whatever HOD requires, it would be quite different from what a teacher requires. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Right. Now, after that, let's say there's another system that is called as admission system or admission department, how they assign the, admission requirements or fulfill their admission requirements, admission requirement. Then there's an account section who would be concerned about payments of fee, generating vouchers and everything. Look, so let's say these are three major parts of this project. Okay. Now, ma'am, could you please repeat your question because I may get lost in the details because I want to
सर
try.
मैंने कहा था कि जो इफेक्टिव रिक्वायरमेंट अप्रोचेस है वो एक तो टीम मेंबर है और दूसरा
Organization,
जो
right, right, right.
ऑर्गेनाइजेशन.
So now we have outsourced this project to a project team, right?
यस सर.
Either either outsource or maybe our own IT department is assigned for this project. In both cases, what do you think? When team members would, spend 10 days with a teacher just to understand what are the duties of a teacher, right? Gather, interview different teachers and ask what features would you require, isn't it?
यस सर.
After that, they may only be able to bring a list of things, you know,
यस.
only list of features. So once they will go to HOD, let's say, or the IT manager or other stakeholders of the organization, this is what you want. So how would a general stakeholder respond to this? They would say, yeah, in 10 days, you had been, visiting us, almost you have attended 10 classes, and this is what you have brought. So what this stakeholder is expected to do, generally, they just have a quick scan of this without envisioning that, okay, how the system would look like once it is developed. Right
यस
now,
सर.
you
सिस्टम
already
कम्प्लेक्स
have,
है लेकिन वो इंफॉर्मेशन पूरी
हाँ,
नहीं लेकर आते.
पूरी नहीं देगा. Oh, he would or she would have just a quick scan of the things and say, okay, that's fine. Instead, a teacher should actually consider himself or herself in a classroom and right day from day one of the semester till day end of the semester, whatever task he or she has to perform, he should or she should envision those things and then communicate to the project team. For example, during certain processes, during the semester, there are many cases in which a teacher is unable to mark the attendance and later on a problem is created that, okay, sir, I was present there, but my name was not registered or it was not active because of maybe fee defaulter issue or something. So now please mark my attendance towards the end of the you know semester. And I would say, how would I come to know? How would I come to know that you were actually present? So I would ask, I will communicate this thing to my team and tell them that, sir or ma'am, please add a comment column or comment box on that so that if there's some problem or I want to leave a comment for my later reminder, I should be able to do that. Is it clear?
यस सर. फिर वो हम अपनी प्रोजेक्ट टीम को बताएंगे.
बताएंगे. But if I have not thought about it, कि होता क्या actually, so in that case, obviously, I'll never be able to communicate this requirement. Is it clear?
ये सर वो प्रोजेक्ट टीम जो वो पहले मतलब जैसे वो टीचर हैं वो थोड़ा सा ऑब्जर्व करके उनको बता रहा है कुछ, तो वो उनको टाइम चाहिए होता है. इससे
टाइम
पहले वो
चाहिए होता है.
क्विक स्कैन नहीं दे सकता है, क्विक
नहीं
स्कैन
नहीं,
नहीं कर सकता.
obviously नहीं, it's matter of interest actually. ये
Yes.
it is very general. Like if you will think things systematically, obviously you are going to produce a very good comprehensive list, even if it is a list.
Yes sir.
Even if it is a list, right? So actually, when they come up with a page, the stakeholders, they don't get serious. Now just compare it with a step when the team has come up and they have asked me, sir, can you give me your system and please log into this? And I would say, oh wow, that's, please sir, generate your login ID. Please generate your password. Now, sir, let's say these are 10 students. Can you mark their attendance? Just test it. Now, this output is more, solid as compared to this list.
Yes
So
sir.
at this stage, teachers or the stakeholders will start taking interest. Is it clear?
Yes, yes sir.
But we want that they should start taking interest right in the
तो
beginning.
कॉन्फिडेंस ऑफ स्टेकहोल्डर्स आल्सो इंक्रीजेस ना, इस प्रोसेस से इंक्रीज भी बहुत करता है कि जैसे जैसे आप देते जाते हैं जो आपका
Exactly.
स्पॉन्सर होता है
हाँ,
कॉन्फिडेंस भी इंक्रीज.
बिल्कुल ऐसे confidence भी increase होता है, right? Even the stakeholders, they themselves get clear about the requirements. Now let me give you another scenario. Okay, let's say, one part of this whole project was to, as a student, you should be able to log in, right? So that means you need to have a feature of password protected login system, right? You need to have a feature for that. So in this, the user, by virtue of your experiences, sir or ma'am, you will tell this thing to team members, or team members by their experience, they would ask you, or they will, add on these system by their experience themselves, that say, okay, if you enter, this is first scenario, this is one scenario that a user, that is a student, when enters the correct login and a correct password, he or she shall be able to log in and go to this home page. Is it clear?
Yes sir.
But if they don't, if they enter a wrong password or wrong ID, in that case, what? They should be shown or prompted with a message, right? You entered an invalid something. Then there should be a feature of forgot password. Now, what would be, how this forgot password work? They will ask you something, maybe a question, secret question that you had, you know, entered while logging in or something, while signing up, right?
Code,
You see
like a
the
code.
code, yeah, or they would send you a code on your mobile. So do you want it on mobile as well, or you just want on an email ID? And there has to be, a safety concern in that. What if I enter Humayun's ID and, when I tell the forget password and they ask me, okay, please enter your email ID, and I get the password of Humayun's, ID on my email. So obviously we don't allow that. Look, this apparently a very simple feature of logging in has so many detailed issues in it. Is it clear? Now let me move forward and a step. Let's have a look on the same thing. So what do you think? How system will actually check this thing? System will store your IDs and passwords somewhere, isn't it? So the moment you will enter an ID or password, they will compare the IDs with the stored IDs, isn't it?
Yes sir.
So that means you need to have a database for that,
Yes.
right? So now this team will ask the stakeholders, sir, how many users you are expecting combined together, the students, teachers, and the administrative staff. Let's say they tell the team member that we would require, or we are approximately 7,000. Let's say, right? Let's take a big jump and we say that 7,000 people are there. So as a team member, I would further ask, look, sir, there's a database server or something which can hold or which can facilitate about 10,000 users. Its cost is this much. But do you think that university is not growing, or this number would be sufficient for coming 5 4? This software is developed now. So this, you cannot develop the software every other day. So what is your expecting that university would grow to 15,000 in less 5 years, or 20,000 in next 5 years, or what? So in that case, the cost of this server is far higher than this server, let's say. You see, this the more you go into depth, the more you go into depth, you get better clarity. Team members would be working on all this, obviously, but they need your feedback on that. Is it clear?
Yes,
Sir,
sir.
Everyone, right? So look, this adaptive approaches, they are generally used in cases in software development projects, obviously in research and development projects where requirements are not clear. And now I hope you understand that as a layman, we might not be knowing the detailed requirements ourselves. Like if I had not discussed this part, this database part, you would never be able to envision or think about it, isn't it? As a user yourself, until
Yes,
team
sir.
member prompts you. Similarly, if I don't remind you about the forgot feature. Now, this is a feature that through your experience, even as a user, you can tell. Correct? At this stage, some person from the administration staff, they would tell that, sir, we at the time of enrollment, at the time of registration of student, we give them an official email ID. So anything, the forgot, you know, password, code should be sent only to that ID and nothing else. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
that's clear.
Right. So you see, this is what I was talking about, the requirement gathering, and this example I will be using later as well in the next slides. Okay. So now let's talk about the defining scope process. Like in case of predictive lifecycle, we generally say the scope statement, but in case of adaptive approaches, uh, we use some other terms. And I just want you to look into those terms and be familiar with that, right? So one thing that you need to, again, like requirement gathering, here again, there's a there's a different scenario in case of adaptive approaches, that scope is continuously refined throughout the project. Clear? So we have a mechanism to adapt to those changes in the scope, and that's why these approaches are called as adaptive approaches. Correct? The
Yes, sir.
diagram that is there in front of you is, it's scheduling related diagram, and we will cover this diagram, or we'll study this diagram in a bit more detail once we'll start the scheduling part after the mids, after the 10th or 11th lecture, maybe 10th lecture, I guess. We will enter into this part.
मेरी
But here,
iteration 0 iteration 1 और 2 है
sir, sir.
जिसमें iteration है रिलीज प्लान में सर
Mhm.
इटरेशन 1 के बाद फेज गेट है या ये रिलीज 1
नहीं
के
नहीं
बाद
मैं
फेज गेट है
okay, let me explain this now. ठीक है, मैं आपको बताता हूँ. Now, you may write down these points somewhere because, for a person who has always been working on predictive, uh, life cycles, he or she may not be able to, or he or she might not have used anything or any document that are mentioned here. This is one thing. Second thing, uh, they've like this is a general tendency that people who have throughout like their experience, work experience, they only work on, if they have only worked on the predictive life cycle, they try to relate, okay, if this is product vision, in the predictive life cycle, what do we call it, right? So this, please remember, these two are totally different approaches. And in product life, in predictive life cycle, there's nothing that that we may directly say that okay, this is equivalent to something in the predictive life cycle. But still, I will try to give you some hints, or I'll try to draw some comparison so that you may relate things. For example, the product vision, it is something you may say similar to a charter. Is it clear? Something similar to a project charter. That means it will give you high level requirements, correct? The high level objectives.
जी सर
Is it
बेसिक
clear?
होंगी, सर बेसिक
So
होंगी, हाई लेवल यानी कि सिर्फ बेसिक होंगी, रिक्वायरमेंट
basic,
डिटेल्ड
okay,
नहीं होंगी.
okay, okay. Now, then based on this product vision, we will prepare a product roadmap. Again, I'm telling you, this roadmap is about schedule. Its focus, its orientation is schedule. But we will prepare a product roadmap. You may say that this is something we may relate to the milestone planning.
Sir, the
Is
product,
sir,
sir, the product
sir,
roadmap isn't it the planning plans which we make, like the
no, no,
management?
this is, sir, this is milestone planning. We
Sir,
सर यानी
generally,
कि आप इसमें देख रहे हैं कि आप क्या अचीव कर रहे हो, जो जो आपने मैप
कर
बनाया है, आप अपने
उसका
फेजेस
generate.
बनाओगे कि इसमें पहुंचे हो कि नहीं
Exactly.
पहुंचे.
For example, the example that I just discussed, in that we would say that okay, within first 6 months we should be able to have uh, a learning management system which will on higher level, in which we can actually incorporate the student registration, the allocation of courses to faculty, the attendance, and let's say we need to have this part of LMS in first 4 months. So actually this is a milestone for you. If we think of in predictive terms, so this is a milestone, right?
right, sir.
Then in next 4 months we shall be able to add this. In next 4 months we should be able to add this. So this gives us a roadmap, but product roadmap. But again, I will just show you all of these, like how a product vision looks like, how a product roadmap looks like. But generally speaking, this is kind of a thing that you may treat equivalent to. Again, I'm not saying they are similar, but it is somewhat near to the milestone planning. Is it clear?
Sir, it's clear.
Okay. Then from the product roadmap, we prepare release plan. Now, you see, once I've decided that, okay, this is the thing that I'll be able to have or accomplish in 6 months. And in 6 months, we say that the first release of this document or this project should come to us maybe in 1 month, or maybe let's say in 1.5 months or 2 months. The second release would come in, let's say, other 2 months. The third release would be completed in other 2 months. So these are the releases that we prepare as by keeping in view the product roadmap. Is it clear?
Sir, sir.
Right. So now within
सर नहीं,
each release,
not
okay,
clear नहीं हुआ
okay,
प्लीज.
okay. Look, the LMS, the features that we just mentioned, that we should be able to complete these features in 6 months, right? So now I'm saying that, okay, in how many releases you'll be able to get those features. You want that you need to have your first release in maybe 1 or 2 months. So we say that, okay, some of the features of the first month plan that is there in the product roadmap, from those, I will actually try to deliver first few feature in the first release within 2 months. Then during next 2 months, other 2 months, I will be able to add the remaining features. And then in the third release, I'll be able to deliver all the features that are there in according to the roadmap plan, the first thing or the first delivery, the complete delivery that I wanted. Right. Again, it depends if I'm going to have incremental approach or iterative or adaptive, whatever. But
But sir,
in
the one
in
you're talking about is incremental life cycle.
look, all of them, not only incremental. Look, if I'm delivering the complete delivery, okay, then it's a usable item, in that case it's incremental.
सर वही ना मल्टीपल
Sir?
डिलीवरी अगर आप एक
हाँ
एंड में देंगे तब अडॉप्टिव और एजाइल होगी ना
नहीं, एजाइल में भी तो मल्टीपल होती है नहीं,
हाँ नहीं सर एंड में नहीं देती
मल्टीपल
एजाइल में
होती
भी
है सर, मल्टीपल
एजाइल में,
होती है
एजाइल में मल्टीपल होती है, राइट।
सर। हम पहले डिलीवर कर देते हैं कुछ पार्ट, वो भी यूजेबल होता है, और साथ
वो
साथ
भी
हम
यूजफुल होता है, लेकिन साथ साथ रिफाइन भी करते रहते,
उसमें
राइट।
फीचर्स ऐड करते रहते
वेरी
एक्चुअली
राइट
सर,
सर।
एक्चुअली सर जो हमायूं पॉइंट रेज कर रहे हैं ना,
सर
वो कह रहे हैं कि देखिए आप इंक्रीमेंट्स और आइटरेशन की बात करें ना, तो आइटरेशन में तो अनफिनिश प्रोडक्ट्स देते हैं और फिर वो
सर
फिनिश
ऐसे
होता रहता है विद द पैसेज ऑफ टाइम।
वेरी राइट सर, वेरी
इंक्रीमेंट्स
राइट
में फिनिश छोटे छोटे प्रोडक्ट्स देते हैं और वो बढ़ते रहते हैं। तो
ऐसे ही
ये
सर,
जायज की
लुक,
बात नहीं कर
नो
रहे,
सर,
लेकिन यहाँ पे वर्ड इंक्रीमेंट्स नहीं होना चाहिए था।
कहाँ पे सर, एग्जैक्टली किस जगह पे?
हाँ तो इटरेशन जीरो
आइटरेशन
ओके
इटरेशन
ओके
जीरो,
ओके ओके सर, अच्छा
आइटरेशन
अच्छा देखें, ओके ओके लुक सर प्लीज,
वन,
ये इस
आइटरेशन टू।
ओके फाइन, आइदर वी कॉल इट आइट्रेशन और द
सर
इंक्रीमेंट,
सॉरी मैं
राइट।
आपकी बात काटूंगा ताकि वो समझ जैसे जो एलएमएस
हाँ
वाली बात आप कर रहे हैं ना अकॉर्डिंग टू
हाँ
दैट एग्जांपल क्योंकि वो यूज हो रहा है ना जो चीज आप
नहीं,
डिलीवर कर रहे
if
हैं
it,
use हो रहा है
look, if it is being produced that way, then it's incremental, right? Or it's agile. In both the cases, you will get something of use immediately in both cases. But let's say we only plan this way, that let's say in LMS, during first 3 months, according to the roadmap, during first 3 months, I say that I shall be able to get a clear picture of the requirements only. In that case, it might not be an incremental approach, right? Obviously, look, it is difficult for any person to give you 3 examples for every line, right? Your
सर आप
broader
सही कह रहे हैं
understanding.
सर अगर मैं इसको करूं इस तरह अगर आप इसे इटरेशन में एलएमएस ऐसे आ सकता है कि आपने पहले बनाया आपने एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन के बनाया आपने दिखाया बट यू हैवंट डिलीवर्ड देम वो कह रहे
Exactly,
एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन के बना लिया
exactly,
अब आप उसका बनाए फिर वो बनाए
e-
वो बताते थे आप नहीं नहीं
exactly.
अब एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन को ठीक करें इसको इस तरह बनाए
Very right,
देन दैट इज इटरेशन
very right. In let's say in first 4 months we shall be able to,
आज का आज
make
आप
something, make something जो
बहुत मुश्किल हो
requirements
गए
ही
सर
clear होनी है. Sir,
सर आज आप बहुत मुश्किल हो गए
नहीं नहीं, आज बहुत आसान है.
सर
Okay,
आज आप मुश्किल इसलिए हो गए कि आज आप नंबर निकालने का नाम नहीं ले रहे
नहीं नहीं सर, मैं वो हो जाएगा, मैं एंड पे दे दूंगा, डोंट वरी, ठीक है, आज आपका हो गया. हाँ, आज आपका हो गया, आप बेफिक्र रहें. Okay, so I hope this is clear to everyone.
यस सर।
Yes, sir,
Right.
it's clear.
So within each release plan, actually, we prepare a plan for each of the releases. Let's say the first release, we say that it would contain, let's say, 4 iterations or increments or whatever you call it, right? Depending upon the nature of the project, nature of the approach that you're using. Let's say we will have 5 iterations or 6 iterations or 4 iterations, each of 10 days, 15 days, or there are different approaches, and sometimes we use iterations of different length. Sometimes you use iterations of same length. I hope increments of same length, right? I hope you remember that. So based on that,
Yes.
we will plan the iteration, how many iterations we would have in each of the releases, right? And broadly speaking, at higher level, in each of the iteration, what all we will produce, right? But then we prepare a detailed iteration plan for each of the iterations. Now look, at this stage, all of these approaches are incremental approaches. So it is quite possible that you might be able to prepare an iteration plan for iteration 0 only in the beginning, or iteration 1 only in the beginning. You may not be able to have a detailed plan of iterations that are far in future, because your requirements would be changing continuously, isn't it? So we may
Yes, sir, it's
have a
near
very
future, not far.
in very vague idea of what we will cover, maybe just two-liner explanation of what we will be covering in iteration 2 and iteration 3, but we'll try to get a detailed picture of at least the iteration that we have to start right now. And in that we say that, okay, in this we will cover a first feature, feature A, feature. Now again, There's a concept here called as feature and user stories. Look, now what is feature and what is user story? There's another term that you need to be familiar with. Can someone tell me what is epics? EPICS? Or themes? Any idea?
The theme is the overall idea which any user or anyone want to have it, and the epics are the basically the sub components which are required to be met in order to get that theme.
Okay. What are
Basically, epic
Mhm.
lies under the table of the themes. There are themes, then we have epic.
Okay. And what is next then?
User
वो तो
Next
मैं
story.
word?
The
Features?
Then
themes
is
is
the
I
user
think the central
functions,
idea.
functions and user story.
Features?
Features and user story.
User
Right.
story.
Then user story. And what is a user story?
User story is the requirement which user anticipates,
Of the
whether
sponsor,
they
na?
are possible or not, and the features are the actual requirements which are possible from the user story.
Okay, no. The user story is the lowest level. This you need to be clear,
Sir, I'm sorry,
right?
what is this? Actually, I don't know. Why don't I know this? But sir, ये क्या है?
Because you didn't study there for PM maybe.
हो
Right.
सकता है, I have missed it.
Okay. Let me explain. Let's go step by step, and then you'll get everything what it is. वो भी आपको समझ आ जाएगा, right? Look, we wanted to have a learning management system. In that, what did we want? We want that there should be multiple features of it, right? And what were those? Let's say student login, student teacher, or any user login, password protected login. This is one feature, right? Then courses allocation for teachers, then courses registration for students, then attendance, right? So all these are features. Is it clear? Our system should
Certainly.
have all these features. Okay, then what? Within login. Now, how many IT people are there among you? The software development people? मेरा student किधर है?
To
एक
your
मिनट.
surprise, man.
No, there was one. There was one. Who was he?
नो नो अगर जो आप अगर सॉफ्टवेयर की बात करें ना, दो ने रिजाइन कर दी, तो अब सिर्फ एक बंदा है.
And who's that?
Sir, his name
Oh,
is Zishan.
Zishan and Rashid Mavia. Aren't you? You're MSCS, if I'm not wrong, sir.
Sir, are you
No,
Rashid
sir.
talking
Mavia.
about the university के
He is
employee ना,
MS
जो
electrical, sir. I think.
No. Sir,
जो
no,
LMS
Rashid.
handle
Sir, I'm
करता
here.
है?
I'm there. Okay. So, what are user stories, sir? Can you teach us? Can you teach us? Any idea, or shall I explain, sir? Number दे रहा हूँ. ये
Sir,
Rashid Mavia.
user story.
Mhm.
Sir, user stories usually जो users का login होते हैं उसको नहीं कहा जाता.
No. Okay. In software development, we generate different user stories that these are different scenarios. You may think of these as different scenarios that once us kindly इसको mute कर लीजिएगा मुझे वो एक और ये. Okay. Now, as a user, there would be different scenarios that a user may see, right? For example, I as a user. Now, when I say I, that means I as a faculty member. Or when you will talk about it, you would say I as a student, right? I as a
Interface.
student. सुने नहीं different scenarios. I as a student shall be able to enter my password, my ID and password so that I may log into the system. This is one scenario that as a user you will want or you will actually encounter once this system will be up, once this product would be delivered. Don't you think you as a user you would be doing this scenario? You will be facing or you will be passing through or going through this step. Correct?
So मैं भी ये कह रहा था ना, जो requirement user anticipate कर सकता है वो
Anticipate
जो है
करता है, right?
users.
So उनको हम different, we take those requirements into, or convert those requirements into different stories or scenarios that any user would face. Similarly, I as a teacher, if enter a wrong password, I shall be prompted about it, so that this should happen. Similarly, I as a user shall have a forgot password option when this happens. If I as a user, let's say I as a student, when if logged in successfully, shall be able to open or have access to these things and so on. So now if you think of, like, okay, you are a mobile user, right? If I ask you, just think of the scenarios, just think of the scenarios that you may face while using a mobile. Can you tell me what would be the first step or first scenario that you may anticipate?
सर
जी,
Forgot
by this
password.
mean we can say that कि सॉरी ये जो
sir.
आपने एग्जांपल प्लेस की है इससे तो यही लग रहा है कि जो फीचर्स होती हैं उसकी डिटेल्ड इंफॉर्मेशन होती है यूजर
Exactly,
स्टोरीज में
exactly. User stories. Look, ये software में it is very, uh, as a user, we may not think of the coding requirements that is there behind every function. If you need to incorporate only just this login function, you see there are different scenarios that we very casually, see uh, on a developed software. But if you have to develop some software from the scratch, obviously you need to think of everything that is possible, all the uses of that system by the user. And then there are multiple users here in this system. We have faculty, we have students, and we have administration. Within administration, we have student advisor, they have a different control, then HODs, then principal, then the DG campus, and so on, then exam department, blah blah blah. Correct? Is it clear?
Yes, it's clear.
Okay, for example, as a mobile phone user, you would say that as a user, I shall be able to make phone call when this, right? So that I can have this. This is one thing. But within that phone call, what do you think? As a user, I shall be able to access the recently call list. Don't you think it should be there? Then as a user, I shall be able to clear the recent call list. Then as a user, I shall be able to select selective numbers from the call list and delete. As a user, I shall be able to save the number that is there in in my recent call list. As a user, I shall be prompted when I'm on call and another person calls me. In that case, I shall be prompted about the call and other person should be prompted about that phone is already engaged or busy. Then as a user, the other user shall be, able to drop a voice note. Then you see, just call is one feature which may have multiple scenarios within it, right? All of these scenarios are user stories. Is it clear?
Yes, it's
Right? So thinking of these, combination of user stories, we actually become able to generate or add one feature into that system. Correct? Is it clear to you, everyone? Okay, so now multiple user stories combined together, they give us a feature, right? And then multiple features added on, the similar nature features, they combine together, give you an apex. Fine? Is it clear?
clear.
Okay, but
Yes.
but you may see slight variations in this breakdown. Sometimes they say
So is
that,
it
okay,
just for the softwares?
mainly for the software, yes. apps and software, yes. Okay. In case of like uh, in Scrum or maybe some other, you know, you may say the frameworks that allow us to apply the iterative methods, in those cases there's an other variant or there's an other view or definition of these things. They say that there are only epics and user stories, right? Epics and user stories, and features are actually those characteristics, those uh, you know facilities that actually allow us to handle different scenarios and make this epics work. Is it clear? They don't say that this is under the feature is under the epics. They say this is on the sideline. Is it clear?
Sir,
Is it
please
clear?
repeat this last.
Okay. In some cases, in some of the frameworks, they say that it is not the breakdown feature doesn't come under the breakdown of the epics. This is basically the characteristics of any, let's say, software or any epics that we want. And to fulfill these user stories or to execute these user stories, we need to generate different features. This is how they say it. That means to just a minute. Okay.
So it
That
basically
mhm.
connecting the epic and the user story.
Yeah,
Source of matlab
exactly.
connecting mod.
Right. Like connecting mode, yeah. So Apex, let's say in our example, the Apex that we chose was to have the registration, right? That was LMS, let's say, only the LMS part, the attendance part or something. In that, we say that, okay, as if in this LMS, how many different user stories are possible? Now to incorporate, let's say these are 50 user stories, different scenarios that different users might, encounter while using the system once this LMS would be up. So we say that, okay, let's say uh, this feature, sorry, this user story, this user story, this one, and this one. These five or four, these could be attained by introducing a login feature. Is it clear?
Sir.
It means the same. It means the same actually. But they say this is not the breakdown itself. It is just user stories and the apex. Then next.
Combining or few of the multiple user stories, you make a wake up a feature,
Fine.
and all multiple features
Yeah.
makes up.
Yeah. So but uh, majority like on many places you would say something like epics, then you features, and then user stories. Is that clear? Right. Another thing that is theme. What is theme? There are some features or user stories that are common to different apexes, right? This is apex 1, this is apex 2, this is apex 3, this is apex 4, right? And there would be some user stories that may be related to or relevant to all of the apexes, correct? For example, if I have to upload the assignment, for that I need a login. If I have to give you an assignment, mark your attendance, I need to have a login, correct? If I need to download or enter your marks, I need to have a login. So this login feature or this like many of the user stories that are related to login, they may be connected with one Apex, two Apex, Apex 3 and Apex 4, all of them, correct? So we combine all such features.
इंडिविजुअल नहीं होता, एक ही एपिक से बड़ी अम्ब्रेला
होता
नहीं
है
होती.
होता है ऐसे ही है. Look, this is what I'm saying. What do you think for a login system, for a system LMS? Don't you think login is required for no matter you want to enter, let's say you want to pay your fee?
Agree, but the login is the feature and जो कर रहा है वो user story है जो जो जो
नहीं
उसको मिलेगा.
उसके नीचे ना different scenarios है ना, entering password. Okay, just combine those password. I mistakenly said that. Okay, like let's say entering your password and ID. This is one user story, right? Don't you think it is related to all of these functions or features or apexes, right?
Yes,
So what do we
in
do?
login details.
हाँ, इनको हम we say that these are themes. We combined all these like related or something which is common to all of the apex. We call them as theme. So theme or apex is at the same level in many books. Is it clear? Actually, this vary from, there's this there are various different variants that are available. Some say the theme is at the top, then those themes are divided into epics. Epics are divided into features. Features are divided into user stories. However, some say that no, epics or theme are at the same level. Epics have their clear-cut user stories or features under them, but the features or user stories that are common among multiple epics, they are called as themes, right? They combine together them as themes. Is it clear? I know this is
Actually,
confusing. I know this is
So, sir,
confusing.
basically the scope breakdown mainly depend on the organizational
Exactly.
structure.
The scope base, no, scope breakdown is dependent upon the methodology that you are using, the project
Okay.
management methodology or the framework that you are using. Look, you must have heard about Scrum, right?
Hmm.
sir, sorry for interruption. The prayer is after 2 minutes.
Okay,
So
sir, Nicholas, sir, but Nicholas, I'll conclude this and then I'll resume after at 7:30, right? So just 2 minutes.
that's
Okay, so Scrum is just a framework that we can use to implement the adaptive methods or agile approaches. Is it clear? Scrum
Sir,
is
I
a
won't
way.
lie, but I think I am very dumb. मुझे थोड़ा सा मुश्किल लग रहा है, ये थोड़ी समझ नहीं आ रही मुझे.
Okay. Wait, we'll resume from this point onwards after the
हमायूं
break.
FOPM के
हाँ,
लेक्चर्स में भी
FOPM.
था ये, उसके साथ रिलेट करने की कोशिश करो तो वो थोड़ा हो जाएगा.
लेकिन
Thank you,
तब भी
ma'am.
कंफ्यूजन थी और अब भी कंफ्यूजन.
अच्छा नहीं, मैं इसको क्लियर करके छोड़ूंगा. Don't worry. Okay. ठीक है, चलें. Okay, we'll meet again at 7:30. Inshallah.
Thank you so
ओके.
very much. Thank